everyone, this is 1 year on and I'm Alison, and following on from the previous episode.
Today's episode continues the interview with Laura, the physiotherapist. This is part 3 of that interview. It's really interesting. I hope you enjoy it.
First, I need to read this disclaimer. This interview is general information. It's not medical advice and doesn't replace assessment or care from your own clinical team. If you have concerns about your health or recovery, please seek advice from a qualified health professional. I'm delighted to welcome Laura to our podcast. How do you build reconfidence? I made notes about this. When we learn to walk as a baby, babies aren't scared of falling, they just do.
Yeah.
They don't even understand that they can fall, but it is quite different as an adult because you have that concept in your head that falling hurts, firstly. Falling is dangerous because they understand the implications of it. How do you rebuild that confidence?
Yeah. So, and again, the reason why babies don't have that fear is because they've never experienced it, or they've never been told that it's going to be a huge issue for them. So you need to, in order to get over that fear, you actually need to prove to the brain, to your own brain, that you're capable.
Okay.
So that sense of fear is where your brain is, it's inbuilt safety mechanism. It's saying, you're going to fall over, we're not capable of this, just sit down, don't try it. But it's based itself off its current experience and its known consequences of the future. So if I fall, I'm going to break my leg and I'm going to end up in hospital. But the best way to get around it, again, is to prove to your brain that you can do it, where you start with small things within your comfort zone and you gradually push that comfort zone out and out and out until that comfort zone encompasses everything that you want to do, right? So again, I highly advise you start with somebody, like a professional, to make sure that you're not going to fall in those building of your comfort zones. But again, that's where you gently push it out in those 1%, the 2% beyond your capacity.
It's quite a process. And then that's the gross motor skills. And then we've spoken a little bit about the fine motor skills in terms of my own work that I did. But hand and arm recovery can be slower and a bit more frustrating than walking. And why is that?
Yeah, so it basically all comes down to the number of neurons and the little connections that you need in order to create good movement in your brain. So if you think about walking, it uses these really large muscle groups, but the accuracy of those muscles is far less important. Okay, so you've just got to hit that foot onto the ground, step, and then go again. But if you compare that to something like hand movements, which are much smaller, and you're doing so many more movements that need to integrate and coordinate with each other much more accurately. So if you think about touching your fingertips to each other, think about all the little muscle groups that have to work well together. It's already surpassing the muscle groups that have to work well to walk.
The margin for error is a lot less, isn't it?
Yeah. So that what we call the neural load, in which the number of connections going on in your brain is far higher for something that you need your hand to work through, as opposed to something that you need to do a rhythmical movement like a walk.
So does that mean then that walking is less tiring neurologically than fine motor skill work?
Yeah. Neurologically, yes.
Yes.
Strength-wise, no.
No, of course
not.
Yeah.
So, they always have their pros and cons. But yes, you can... And I see a lot of people after stroke in that sort of inpatient rehab, so maybe 2-3 months after their stroke, and a lot of them prefer to walk because they see the improvements, and it's much easier to keep just walking on a treadmill than it is to sit down and really get the hand to coordinate all of its movements together to do something meaningful.
Because they're more minute movements too.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't necessarily see the progress as much.
And we talk about like undershooting and overshooting as well, so that accuracy component. So again, it's far more noticeable for something when you're doing really small movements as opposed to, you took a big step there, or you didn't take as big a step there, that's fine, you're still stepping. But yeah, it makes a huge difference when you're trying to pick something up.
So opening the weather app instead of Facebook. Yeah, I'm overshooting, saying the wrong thing. You're explaining to me now what I was getting wrong and how I improved it by basically being addicted to it.
Repetitions.
Well, it was repetition. And in fact, one of my brain training apps, I played this one game over 1,000 times. And I got good at it, obviously, because I played it so much. And it's a game to do with putting a train in a garage on a train track, and you're changing the points. And the game is called Train of Thought. And I got so addicted to it. But being able to, what was it again? It was keeping an eye on lots of things at once, sort of sustained attention. That was really interesting. So, I mean, it is exactly what you're talking about. It's repetition, and having an addictive personality probably.
Yeah, getting something you're really interested in actually speeds up your rehab process.
There you go. Oh dear.
But in saying that, you tend to see upper limb paralysis much more commonly than lower limb paralysis. So a lot of people after stroke might be able to get back to some form of walking. They might have a completely paralysed upper limb.
Interesting.
And theoretically there's no background as to why that happens. But I would say what compounds is that early on after stroke, which is where that, your maximal capacity for improving happens, most of the emphasis of rehab is to regain lower limb strength and control to get you more independent. Get out of your chair, get out of bed, move independently. And again, it's easier to achieve that walking component in the hospital setting. Yeah. And patients are, they're on different drugs, they're really drowsy, their brain's had an absolutely massive insult, so it's really hard for them to focus, and it'll be harder to regain the upper limb as opposed to lower limb.
And I suppose in the end, being able to be mobile gives them that freedom. So can we think about then maybe what the small wins you can do for arm and hand function?
Yeah, so I guess again this will depend on the journey of that person. So say if a person started with a completely paralysed arm, so there was no voluntary movements, a small win I would consider would be really small flickers of muscle activation.
Yep.
So
wiggling the fingers?
Yeah. Even less than that. Even if you saw a little tendon flicker.
Oh, you can actually see that?
Yeah, or like even just sort of like you see like a little contraction happen through here.
Okay.
So that means there's improvement,
okay.
Right? So even a lot of people really, and fair enough, they get very discouraged because that arm is basically useless, I can't do anything with it. But if you keep feeding the signal down to that arm, there might start to be some sort of improvement. And with a paralysed muscle, you can continually send that message down. You don't have to have somebody with you to do it. You can just be like, move, get those fingers wiggling, and any sort of improvement there is that small win. I think even changes in sensation, so if your arm was completely numb to begin with and you couldn't feel anything, but it sort of switched to some tingling or you're getting some mild pins and needles, that may even be a signal that some sensory signals are starting to improve, which means there's communication between the brain and those muscles.
That's interesting. I remember somebody somewhere, sometime, I can't remember exactly when, but they were saying that how you think that the synapses or whatever it's called, the movement is created first in your visualizing that you're doing it.
Yes.
In the brain, and then it's like I think therefore I can sort of thing. So think about, okay, I'm going to move this hand or this muscle or this finger or whatever, and that's a really interesting thing I think now in terms of, say, pushing people on in general terms as well as in this rehab space.
Yeah, absolutely. And then even for people with some function in their hands but maybe not enough to be completely independent on that side, even if they have the basics of that movement, but it's not consistent yet, that's still a really great sign that these new pathways are being developed and they just need the consistency. So the high amount of reps, force yourself to use that side, and your brain will have to adapt and respond to it.
The 1,000 reps. I think that was my neuropsychologist said that. Do something 1,000 times.
I reckon 10,000.
10,000?
10,000, and you might. Yeah.
Well, and that can get boring.
Oh, yeah. And most rehab is very boring. But if you can develop those games, if you can develop that sort of the goal setting and being goal orientated, that can usually help a lot of people to achieve those reps.
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, you can be addicted to these games, but the gamification can actually, it's enjoyable to play a little game, and then it does train whatever skill it is that you're wanting to develop. And because you don't realise that you're doing work and the reps, because you're getting sucked into a game that's, taking 2 minutes of your time each time, I think that's where the benefit of these games is in the rehab type space, because you're not realising that you're doing rehab.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I've been in a lot of inpatient rehab settings, and they've been fortunate enough to get these big robots that basically assist somebody to walk.
Oh, wow.
And the robotics have all these inbuilt games, so that whilst they're still monitoring the amount of muscular activation that is being contributed from the patient, it's putting it into a game. So it's telling them to increase that activity to get the little man on the screen to fly and hit the coins or something like that. So they're getting high repetitions, and they're being promoted to build that consistency in their performance based on the feedback that they're getting through the game.
Thank you very much for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, please like, share, subscribe and leave a comment. I'll be back next time for part 4 of this same interview with Laura. Thank you.